Your party has traveled the northern forests of Pram for months. You've collected pelts and made a pocket full of gold, selling them to illegal trading posts scattered throughout the borderlands just north of civilization. You've looked into the glowing eyes of the demon bears and sent them back to the hells from which they spawned. A peace was found with the elven primitives, wide-eyed, clear-skinned beauties. They offered a peaceful respite from the dangers and discomforts of the wilds. But that peace came with a warning: the Reaper of Dway. But no tale of terror will keep you from your travels. It's not the first time you've heard of the long-clawed horror. If it's real at all, it can't be so terrible as the stories say. Nothing is unkillable. You first encounter the Reaper in the dead of night. Your watchman cries out on alert. He is in peril, but from what you cannot say. You prepare a spell, but no target. The fighter swings wild, but stumbles back, confused. Something strikes him, knocking him further, but still nothing. No target. Your thief throws dust in the air, hoping to catch something invisible. Your scout throws a net. "On the hill! On the hill!" the fighter calls out, but the hill is over 100 feet away. You rush forward for a better view, but there is still nothing to see. Still, your watchfulness may have saved your teammate as the unexpected attacks finally come to an end. In later years, you'll explain, "We were lucky to survive. Stubborn us. We tried to outwit that thing for days. It allowed us no sleep, lured us into traps. It was a nightmare, a mystery with no answer. Stay out of the Dway. Some beasts aren't there for you to kill." Sage's entry, the Reaper of Dway. This extremely dangerous, intelligent, and reclusive creature has never been seen clearly in the light of day. A recent observation put the long-armed horror at 14 feet tall, but it's said capable of raking anything it can see with deadly poison claw attacks. In that sighting, it's said the party saw the creature from over 1,000 feet away, and it struck down a fighter with no chance for recourse. The roughly humanoid being may be completely invisible at night. Hello and welcome to Pelakar. Well, that was some scary-ass shenanigans. How do you think that monster did that kind of stuff? Dimension door? Blinks? Maybe some kind of phantasmal killer? That's a thing, right? Used to be. Try not to think about it too much, especially if it's close to bedtime. Hey, did you know this is the show where we're building a big-ass part of my world? The world of Pelakar. That's that map over there that you can't see anything on. That's Pelakar. That's my baby. How big? How big of a piece of the world? Well, it's about the size of Africa, if you add a bunch of water into it. So, there's a lot of room for adventure here. A lot of space for a party to travel around. It's big enough to do a Viking theme. You could do pirates. On the other hand, Pram, it's as big as India, so you could do a whole inland campaign and never get close to a boat. My name is Lewis Nichols. I've been doing this stuff for a while now. I ran my first campaign back in 1986, played just a couple of years before that. I've published my own RPG with a little help from my friends. I ran some great campaigns. One of them turned into this. Northern Pram is big. It's diverse with dozens of overlapping, unique biomes. The weather is subtropical, edging into the temperate, much like the southern U.S. Cold snaps still rarely mean freezing, but some mountains do get snow. There are plains in the east, hosting huge herds of reptilian porgeese, hunted by Thymera, a cold-blooded cousin of the griffin. Hills proliferate in the west, and old-growth forests have become tall, deep, and dark. 3 great bays divide the north. They're too big to be called fjords, but I'll probably do it anyway. These seas thrive with life, as do the many lakes and rivers in the region. Humanoids and Velito are a rarity. What is not a rarity are powerful beasts. Drakes, wyverns, plain-dwelling behemoths, and dangerous forest predators are all surprisingly common in northern Pram. Exceptional versions of all of these are also numerous. The north is sacred to the inhabitants of Lower Pram. Individuals and governments alike are prohibited by ancient beliefs to settle in the northern regions. Albeit, not everyone agrees with these rules or plays by them. For now, this is a conflict of man. Whether holy retribution waits for the transgressors or the taboos simply melt away with time has yet to be seen. For now, it is only the adventuring types that travel into the north, and they are not prohibited from traveling these dangerous lands. Permanent camps are not allowed, but boys will be boys, and these boundaries will surely be pushed. Now it's already time to get into the particulars. Get comfortable, fellow adventurers. I think Pram Part 1 is going to hold the record for my longest video for a while, but this one's pretty beefy, enough for a snack and a drink. Before we start, let me assure you, I might not know everything about everything, but when it comes to world building, you can trust me. Pushing back against the northern creep of exploration are the Rangers. No, not those Rangers. There, that's better. And it's not a D&D class either. Although, if you're running 5e or something close to it set in Pram, you could probably work it out. Although, now that I think about it, these guys are really closer to paladins, with an oath to enforce the rules governing the North. The Rangers are a subfaction inside the Ascendian Order, charged with patrolling the North and making sure the rules are obeyed. To cross the Rangers is to cross the Order, meaning groups responsible for lawless fighting teams can be effectively fined, or individual transgressors punished. Ranger training is fighter heavy, with skills focusing on wilderness survival, tracking, hunting, and so forth. The Order as a whole has embraced the new priesthood where their interests align. They have invested in competing against the Merku in proficiency in Ziblich. However, they are easily a year or two behind. Not so bad when all of Pram is about 15 years behind the Kelds. So, Northern Pram, what do we have? Let's break it down into some distinct destinations and beasties. Maybe that'll keep it interesting, relevant, and at a decent length. Remember, if you ever want more on a given topic, leave a comment. You will get the answer, and you might even get a whole video. First up, Dry Castle Lake and some more politics. In our snapshot of Pram, Dry Castle Lake is the gateway to the north for the entire Valveda region. Totally not influenced by the fact I'm living in North Bay, Ontario, which also claims to be the gateway of the north. There are fewer wyverns here, but more geese, much more dangerous and harder to get along with. Osri Lumina exists on the frontier and has taken advantage of that fact for years now. There are always warriors looking to continue north, and this small collection of coastal and river towns is the perfect place to do it. Adventurers need supplies, weapons and armor, cooking accessories, tents, rations. Hey, they have chips here. Yummy. Well, not really. It's tack, actually. Bread so dense, you have to soak it in tea just to eat it. But it lasts longer than any other ration of the day. But watch out, there are rangers here, making sure the fighting teams know the rules. Heaven forbid someone sell an overspec tent or depart on anything bigger than a canoe. Gee, I bet no one would dare cheat the system. Did I mention Osri Lumina is one of the most dangerous places on Pram? The leading cause of death? Overhearing the wrong conversation. Tensions run high in the city. The rangers might be untouchable, most of the time. But a shopkeeper getting a little too friendly with them might just have himself an accident. This is a controversy of riled up religious zealots versus profit. If there's ever been a better reason to riot, I don't know what it is. There are temples here, and they're totally not political. Almost everyone has an opinion, and if you don't, both sides hate you. Meanwhile, the tyrant Otto Britash steers a course down the middle. He supports whoever is listening and takes full advantage of being the local badass. Early in an age, Minotaur have a natural advantage. And oh yes, Otto is a Minotaur and he's used to having things his way. He once headbutted a man so hard the poor Tagar's head split nearly in two. It was a very disturbing sight. Two ladies and a man named Stephen fainted. Now Otto knows he can't oppose the Rangers, and they do bring in a fair amount of money to his little state. if he needs help, and they are far more dependable than the transient fighting teams passing through. Still, he grew strong beyond the northern shores of Dry Castle Lake, and if they'd have sold pavilions back in the day, he damn sure would have carried one. He knows about the camps on the western shores, at least most of them. Debo Knox knows them all. He operates a converted fishing boat for traveling adventurers and pays his fair share of kickbacks. When adventurers bring in a good haul, Otto gets their bribes because he knows all the rules they've broken. That's where the big money is. But it's not consistent, and nowhere even close to the kind of wealth one would need to oppose the Ascendian Order. Do you want to run a frontier campaign where thieves and rogues are relevant? Well, this is the place to go. But if you want to leave civilization completely behind, maybe the Forest of Robal is for you. This is a true enchanted forest. In the last age, it was an elven paradise full of creatures filled with goodness and compassions. Those spirits remain, if the intellect does not. Now the forests are home to playful nymphs and unicorns, a host of happy creatures set firmly in the warm glow between the spirit world and that of the living. If I used alignment, this place would ooze goody-goody, jolly long stockings, happy to see you, pleasant day. Giant hat toadstools grow here. These enormous fungi take root in the empty glens and glades. They can reach enormous sizes, up to 40 feet in height and over 100 feet diameter. When one of these behemoths dies, it sends out a wave of smaller toadstools, which are steadily smaller as they spread out like ripples in a pond. Meanwhile, the center is left in a super fertile state, with the very middle prime soil for the growth of living trees, which will later wander about on their own accord. Pools of healing water and rare greenery will flourish, eventually being replaced by a luxuriant forest, turning old growth over the centuries, kept by the living trees which it spawned. These deep, magical forests are the home of the greatest mysteries, greater spirits, fantastic beasts with the wisdom of ages, and fairy magic impossible for the world of man to comprehend. Then one day, a tree falls to age, a sacrifice of renewal in the cycle of life. It is here the giant hat grows, beginning the next genesis of life and legend. The southern forest is full of spanning vistas as the elevation rises around the Elvinti Mountains. These tall spires rise out of the forest, just where the trees grow tallest. Small lakes pool in the hill country under the shadow of Mounts Irma, Fina, and Cardone. This is the land of giant beaver and alluring sprites, a place where unexplained lights dance in the night and nightmares fear to tread. Next on our tour, Grail Tosser Lake. You know, most lakes really aren't that deep. There are bodies of water you can barely see across that only have a few pools over 10 feet deep. Some of them you can just walk across. Grail Tosser isn't one of those lakes. At 100 miles long and 20 feet across, he's a big boy and he gets low. At the lake's deepest point, it hits a depth of 1,000 feet. What lake monsters might be lurking down there? Grail Tosser came into the lexicon of Pram mythology a few years ago when a fighting team was trying to get a good reading on depth. In typical adventuring fashion, they had a few boats lashed together on a day you probably shouldn't have been out on the water at all. Half the group stayed on shore. The other half went on the boat. Among them was a very disgruntled Agmar Shredderhorn. The one-horned Minotaur didn't want to be on the boat at all, but they needed a fighter type, just in case. He drew the short straw. He sat for a while, and then decided to stand on the prow of one of the boats and practice sword techniques. When he accidentally sliced the sounding rope, there was a little PvP wrestling match, and his sword went over the side. Frustrated they had lost the sword, mad it was raining now, and windy, they feared for the worst when a glow appeared on their port side. To their amazement, a female arm lifted up the weapon from the depths. A magical weapon now, known forever as as Grailborn. By the way, if this all sounds a little like King Arthur, I agree there are similarities. However, the sword ended up being bait, and the siren offering it, well, she killed several party members over the next 2 days in some extremely violent encounters. Regardless of how it all ended, adventurers are still drawn to the lake, more than willing to throw jewelry, weapons, and clothing into the depths. Is it a gamble? Of course. Will it ever pay off again? Probably not. But these guys are soldiers of fortune after all. Nothing ventured means nothing gained, and it sure can't be any worse than gambling on the tables down at Termini Duray. Ooh, flowers. The silver bloom strange fire. This magnificent flower grows in very specific locations on Pram. In the few places where fresh water butts right up against the high mountain slopes, these flowers flourish. Growing from bulbs, the iris variant can produce spring blooms 6 inches or bigger in size. They can be many colors, usually varying by slope or cove. They will always be streaked with silver. Oh, and we're not talking about just the color. These flowers absorb the metal from the ground. As they age, it builds up, creating a higher and higher metal content in the blooms and the bulbs themselves. A single mature plant can hold a gold piece's worth of silver, making it an extremely valuable commodity. Even though it's not strictly illegal, some groups frown upon the practice of harvesting and will seek to protect the plants or prevent their trade in the South. Collecting these flowers is dangerous work even without the roadblocks to commerce. Dangerous terrain in a harsh wilderness is not something everyone will survive. And if you're into survival, you might want to stay away from the Avelli Iron Watcher. On the Avelli Peninsula, deep in the bucolic forest of Bourbon, is a tree reaching above all the rest. This is the Iron Watcher. It's an ironwood tree stretching 200 feet into the sky, over double the height of any other tree in the forest. It can be seen for miles. It is not the only ironwood around. The long-lived trees are somewhat common, perhaps numbering over 100 mature specimens in this forest alone. While the Watcher is normal, it has attracted a noteworthy following of living trees, similar to the Ents of Lord of the Rings or Treants of D&D. Pelicar's giant mobile flora is not remotely pacifistic. The trees have bound themselves to the Watcher and will die to protect it. While the living trees are intelligent, they are dim-witted by standards of Velito. Most importantly, as bestial Zuala, they are genetically bound to protect their charge, in this case, the Watcher. Acting from a position of strength, they will react with violence to all but the most benevolent of approaches. If you'd rather take a malevolent approach, you can go into the Drenched Hills. Pram's far northeastern peninsula is about 1 bucket of water away from being classified as a perpetual rain zone. Normal annual rainfall averages about 60 feet, which is about 50% higher than Earth's highest. As a result, it's not a particularly green area. It's a hilly biome, about 2/3 exposed stone, while the rest is mostly covered in thick brown moss, capable of resisting the relentless flooding. Not into rain? Let's go visit the Fisher King. Living in the mountains of Zabol, this rock is a kingfisher with about a 35-foot wingspan. He's not the biggest rock around, but he will rock your world if you give him a reason. He's equivalent in stats to your average rock, just a little smaller than most. Why is he a big deal? Watching him fish is one of the greatest sights to behold in the Sentinels. Diving down and penetrating the surface of High Peak Bay or Dry Castle Lake, only to soar back into the sky with his catch is life-changing. We're going to cheat a little bit here, just a bit. Can't mention this king without talking about the lands he oversees. The Zabol region has one of the densest populations of birds in the world. It's most notable for the plethora of songbirds, many quite colorful in their decoration. Certain feathers from these nests can bring hundreds of gold per pound in just the right market, and a few very special ones, a few hundred gold just on their own. All those birds make this a loud place to visit. In fact, it's sometimes hard to discern one cry from the next. As such, there are predators who take advantage. Normally, You could hear a forest wyvern or a shambling colossus coming from a long way off, but not here. Hulks and dangerous fungi are a constant threat. The Parandae. In this forest of birds, there were bound to be some exceptional versions. The Parandae can be any form of bird except it's 50 to 300% larger than normal and of average intelligence. That's a stat of 11 in D&D or a 22 in Pellicar. For the most part, these guys are just birds doing bird things, but they are a curious lot, and any visitors to the forest will attract their attention. Now, when you're not talking to the intelligent birds, you better be watching out for the forest creepers. While not a specific entity, the forest creeper exemplifies the dangers of traveling in the north. These stealthy creatures are a rough equivalent to the dungeon-dwelling lurker of Dungeons & Dragons fame. The forest creeper will take on the characteristics of the forest floor, where it can wait for months. It may partially contract to capture and absorb small prey such as mice. Even creatures as big as possums and skunks can be subdued without fully exposing itself. Such as it is, it's possible a creeper has been in place for so long, it's in fact covered by forest dander and nearly impossible to detect before engulfing a victim. Once captured, it's almost impossible for any man-sized victim to escape without help from the outside. If you can avoid the forest creepers, you might find your way to DePauli Falls. Perhaps the most elegant waterfall on Pellicar, DePauli Falls is actually a quintuple waterfall with 3 rivulets draining into Ashirwa's pool. From there, a second fall pours 1,200 feet into Ashirwa's basin before finally dropping to the river level at DePauli's feet, sometimes known as DePauli's Pool, 400 feet below. The first 4 drops range from 600 to 800 feet, for a total distance, top to bottom, of 2,400 feet. The amount of water moved wouldn't put DePauli Falls in Pellicar's top 20, but the multiple streams coming together is a wondrous sight to behold. There are all sorts of lore about these falls. Some say it's a throne of an ancient titan. They swear you can see the outline of a cyclopean sword in the rock formations to the left of the falls. Others insist drinking from the water guarantees fertility. There's even a story about a woman getting pregnant just by swimming in the basin. Pregnant or not, you will want to visit the Bay of Goodell. Each of the northern coast's bays have something, or several somethings, that make them special. As for the Bay of Goodell, it's the crabs. Often reaching monumental sizes, these crabs are not just an excellent food supply, but a danger to adventuring teams. Not counting Goodell himself, if he even really exists. The purple-hued crustaceans can grow to over 5 feet across, with the occasional unconfirmed sighting putting them as big as 20 feet. Worse than that, there are 2 bestial versions known to exist. The first capable of electrical attacks at range. The second, spitting freezing salt water at targets up to 100 feet away. Both have enhanced natural armor and a nasty disposition. Goodell is one of the many beasts worshipped as a god. Have I mentioned it's early in the age, when the laws of nature and the rules of the game can both get a little squishy? Well, I'm mentioning it again. There are spellcasters saying their prayers to the beast. If he still lurks in the depths of the bay, or resides in the realms that only gods travel, there are surely bigger crabs lurking in the deepest recesses of the bay. Would you rather keep your head above water? Well, let's go to the Infinity Cave. For an audience used to typical fantasy caves, the infinite might not be the first thing that comes to mind when thinking of a big cave. In fact, it might be better described as just an enormous hole in the side of Mount Farah. Then again, isn't that exactly what a cave is? Infinity Cave is one giant cavern gouged into the side of the steep mountain face. Its entrance is over 100 feet high and 150 feet across. The cave is so vast, perspective becomes an issue until one realizes the greenery on the cavern floor is in fact a forest, and the central pond, it is by all rights a lake. It even has an island in the middle of it, which in turn has its own pond, but that's not the point. Infinity Cave stretches for 500 feet back into the mountain. Sadly, it's pretty much a dead end after that. As bad as past adventurers want this to be an entrance into an expansive cave system, it's really just a hole in the side of the mountain, after all. And if you've got a big hole, you need a big bowl to fill it. Ugh, no, 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 bad segue, bad segue. We're talking about Veavota, the primordial bull. Another godlike creature, this massive reptile is considered by some to be the progenitor of all porgies. If that's true, it harkens back to a time when the now docile food animal put up a much more convincing fight against those who would consume it. Veavota is solid muscle and the size of an Indian elephant. 5 horns protrude from its head. There is even evidence this creature can transmogrify into a giant humanoid, 2 of the horns becoming separated and forming into great curved swords. Weird swords or not, this guy can't touch you if you're out at sea, so let's talk about one. The Heartbreak Sea. If I said this is one of the Bermuda Triangles of Pelicar, you might question my geometry, but you'd have a pretty good idea of what I meant. There are a number of threats to navigation in the area, some verified, many only suspected. You have your classic storms out of nowhere, you have twisted navigation, and you have disappearances at sea. East goes west, up is down. In the end, your voyage might just go south. A few sailors that have visited the area claim to have heard singing, often on foggy nights. Others insist they have actually seen beautiful elves and human-like figures walking the deck. One brazen captain claims to have taken a roll with one. Others just say they're cannibals. Reports are never consistent. This is definitely a job for qualified adventurers. Maybe you could at least get a good sounding. Some reports swear the sea is shallow. Others have failed to find any bottom at all. Back onto the land one more time. Let's talk about King Farah, brother of Veavota. This big old kaiju son of a biscuit eater is one of the toughest kids on the block. First appearances, he's just your typical porgies, living off the plains of Eeyore. Well, I mean, your typical 25 feet at the shoulder porgies, of course. This plumper is more than a whole lot of sexy. He's pretty smart, and he's a spellcaster. He has his fair share of incantations ranging right up through 7th rank. Converting him into 5e, he should be a threat to even a strong group up past 10th level. And it'll never just be him. He's going to be able to call on buddies, just about every animal within 20 miles. You can make him what you will, but to me, he's an Archon, just below Spireman in the Celestial Hierarchy. Killing him, if you can, will bring down some hefty curses. Of course, a lot of this is DM information. Your players will probably just think he's nothing more than a really holy cow. Leaping Lizards, it's another half-hour episode. Well, it's also earned you another bonus episode because I had planned on including this whole thing on wilderness adventure, and no, it's not going to fit here. I don't want to set any new records. I've already split Pram into 3 major episodes, and I'm barely scratching the surface. We're going to have to talk about this beast-worshipping religion, which means a more universal cosmological episode. We're going to have to do lots of stuff, folks, and we're going to do it all. For our next big episode, we're going to finish out Pram. We're going to the southeast. We're going to talk a lot more about ethnicity. We're going to get into culture, music, art, all the stuff we really haven't got into yet. We're going to do this right, no matter how many episodes it takes. By the time we're done, you're going to be having dreams about Pram, and then nightmares. In the meantime, I want you all to take care of yourselves. Pass on an encouraging word to your friends, or even a stranger. Throw a can of ravioli into the basket for your local food bank. A lot of grocery stores have a box or something right up front. Give somebody a friendly smile and make their day. Thank you all very much for dropping by. I'm glad that you shared a little time with me today. Thanks for listening. Cheers.